Of course. All right. Now I can say welcome to our last November webinar and the last webinar that the OIE coordination team will be running. The rest of them are on you guys, the participants, to join with your partners and present. So we want to be hearing from you starting in December. So get ready. It'll be exciting. Today's call will be about COP23, which was the recent UN climate talks that took place in Bonn, Germany, that were hosted by Fiji. So we're excited to hear from a couple of the people who were at the conferences. Cherry and Amalen will both be presenting about their experiences there, and then I might talk a little bit too. We also, Nisreen from Sudan said that she'll be on to present, as well as Yaura from China. So do either of you want to get started?
Maybe I should.
Maybe Amalen should go before me because I'm more.
What? No, I should go last. Sarah, you go first.
No, I go last.
Oh.
Amalen! Woohoo!
Okay, 1 second. Let me find these pictures and stuff. Give me one moment.
Yep. So did anyone have any, during the whole thing, the presentation, you're welcome and encouraged to ask questions. You can write them in the chat if someone's, if they're kind of speaking or presenting more so at the time, feel free to write them in the chat or just shout them out. Okay? Because what you guys want to know is really what we want to share, right?
All right. Hey, everyone. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, firstly, hi, everyone. I'm Amalen. Nice to meet all of you. I am from Malaysia. I've been a part of OIE. I was on the program with Cherry as my partner last year. And we were guided by Sarah. OIE was an amazing experience, all that jazz. And this year, CAC, the NGO behind this, together with CYCAN, gave me a badge to go to COP. So what I was doing at COP was something already predetermined. Before that, for a few months, we already had a team going, and what we were doing was planning an art space. So what is an art space? That's what I'm going to be showing you guys about. But this art space is generally for activists to come together, have a space for them to talk with each other, meet, discuss what's happened today or in the COP, what happened throughout the discussions, and plan accordingly. And when I mean plan accordingly, in COP, we are allowed to do actions. We're allowed to not just be a part of the negotiations, like tracking or whatever. We are also allowed to, in some ways, influence what goes on through our actions. And such actions, I guess for most people, you would call it like protests or small demonstrations or things like this. And that's what people do during COP. You see a lot of these going on throughout the days, especially in issues pertaining to things that are happening right now, because you need to understand the COP is a top-down approach, and activism and actions is a bottom-up approach. When they meet together, that's when really awesome stuff can happen. But that's why we need more bottom-up approach, and having an art space is really important for that. And that's what I and a couple of others together, we set up this year's art space at the Rhizome in 99 Strasse. Okay, this is just an inside joke, sorry. But yeah, So I just want to show you guys a few pictures of the art space, the people at the art space, and also the types of actions that were conducted and the different types of disobedience that was done. So this, as you can obviously see, is stuff at the art space. This is when we were setting up stuff. This is Danny. He's the other guy who was involved with setting up the art space. This is at the end of the fourth day that we were open. All of these different things here, you can see my mouse. These are all different actions. This banner here was painted by Sarah and Natalie. Amazing. Really amazing workers. They got a lot of stuff done. All of this was all used in different protests. Maybe Sarah will show you some pictures of this action that they had. There was a lot of issues about the transatlantic pipeline that was going on. People in right now are still being detained and oppressed by the military because they've been protesting against this pipeline. So this was something that they decided to bring up in the COP. There are different groups of people that decide these kind of things, like different activist groups which work global scale to coordinate stuff. So this is one of the things that they did in our art space. We made a little carbon inflatable. This inflatable, we tried to use it like it was a pipeline. And this is another picture. Okay, random pictures, sorry. These are some of the messaging that we put into banners. This is when we were trying to make a huge puppet. We had a street theater, and during the street theater, we did a little performance of capitalism being defeated by the power of the goddess Kali, a strong, empowered woman who is the goddess of death and new life. So this was like a little street theater battle we used to send out the message of system change, not climate change. This is the whole process of us making it. This is just it took us 2 whole days to make this puppet. You'll probably screen through more of these pictures. But yeah, this is the art space basically was like this. It was just a lot of materials for people to use, a lot of space for people to work on. And another plus point was there was beer for €1. So a lot of people came over, turned it into whatever they wanted it to be. This guy's Angus. He has his own red carpet he goes around with, and he turned this little place into his workstation. He does a lot of video and social media stuff. He's quite cool. But yeah, as you can see, got a shit ton of stuff all over, hanging and drying. These are the beers I was talking about. Shouldn't be promoting alcohol, but no to alcohol. But yeah, fossil fuels, all these different things we had going on throughout the place. Let me tell you a little story about this turtle. So this turtle is a picture of that represent how the world is actually on the back of a giant turtle drifting through space and time and all that. But this guy who was making this man here, he drew this whole thing. It took him a long time to draw it. And then he was daunting having to paint everything precisely as well, This got done in 30 minutes. People just popped up at the art space. They wanted to be involved. They wanted to do something. And they did. And together they made this amazing banner, which went on throughout the COP. So this is the puppet show, which I was telling you guys about. We had a little digger, which I made. I made this little digger to represent the coal mines. Just 50 miles from the COP venue, there was this huge coal mine, which I went to as well. It was crazy. And yeah, so this is some of the things we went through the march. This is the march that was going on. Awesome stuff all around. All these amazing people with their banners. I don't know if you recognize this banner. It was painted in the art space. All sorts of amazing people around. All of this is talking about different types of energy that they prefer compared to coal energy. Because this is a big issue for them over there, coal energy, and also for the world. We need to stop depending on coal. And yeah, so this is one of the times we did a little street performance. We were with the Indigenous Resistance Group. And yeah, it was amazing. Like, these are some of the things that we did to tell our story of activism, and at the same time use art, because the power to the people, guys. We have power to change and influence a lot of things. Even though you may not agree, you may think that some of these may just be like, you're not doing much. But in reality, like for example, in Paris, for the Paris Agreement, before it was signed, the first week of COP was filled with so many actions inside the COP zone as well, where everyone was talking about 1.5. For those of y'all who don't know, please read out the Paris Agreement. So 1.5 degrees is safe temperature for increment, where we don't lose so much and things are not so bad, because the current trajectory is over 3 degrees increment over the next 100 years. We don't want that. And basically, we protested against it. We had so many actions. Like in one day, there are like 5 zones in the Bula zone, the main negotiation zone. There's about 5 zones there, and you can do as many actions as you want throughout the day. So like I created a schedule app, a scheduling system, and wait, let me find that. So this is the action schedule. You guys see here, this is basically all the different actions that were conducted during the whole COP. This is for week 2. There's so many on this one little particular hour, because during this hour there were a lot of things that were going on the previous day which people wanted to talk about. Week 1, there's week 2 as well. There were so many things going on, and these were all inside the Bula and Bond zone. These are the places where the negotiators are, and if you want to influence someone, these are the people you influence, because they're the ones who are ideally negotiating for their country. So these are the people you need to lobby to, talk to, make them listen, and using all these different art tactics, especially when you use the media, it really gets people's heads to turn. It gets people to talk about something. And yeah, that's what I really learned in COP, how to facilitate an art space and artists and other people wanting to make things. It's just through doing stuff. At the end of the day, when it comes to getting stuff done, you just gotta end up doing it first. Like, just if you need to dig a hole, just start by like digging a hole. Like, start a small hole before you make a big one. I know my analogies right now are sucking so bad, but let's go with it. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about art spaces. But doing actions and doing all these kind of things, especially with people around you who are of like-minded interests, and trying to convert people who are not, that's a real tough, challenging thing to do. But it's something that I feel if we start doing more, we can make people listen to us. We can get it happening. And yeah, that's all I have to say. So, Cherry, you want to talk more about negotiation stuff? See, I'm very bad at following negotiations and things like this. I mean, I do follow quite a bit about climate finance, but I'm more into climate action. I would rather not call myself an activist, but an artivist, using art with activism. Okay,
Yeah.
Sarah.
First, does anyone have any questions for Amalen? I'll put you on the spot now.
I was just about to say someone should stop me from talking.
Nope.
Okay, I don't think anyone's got any questions. Maybe I was talking too fast. Was I talking too fast, anybody? You could have told me if I was.
We
I
under.
don't think these questions. Cherry, you want to take over?
Okay, no questions, the chair can go. And I'll pull up your slide.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed what Amalen said because when I followed him to the airspace the last day, it was just closed. Yeah, but luckily, I joined in an exciting demonstration with him last day. And as he said, I will follow workers mainly on negotiations because I was assigned to do that from my supervisor. And today, I'm gonna share some of my observations from the American delegations this year because it was really an interesting thing to observe their different and even contradictory presence there. No, not until the, yeah, I made a similar topic to the introduction of this year's COP, that is one conference to join, to describe the U.S. delegation because there are two vastly different and contradictory delegations here in this year's COP. Next slide. Yeah, as you can see in these pictures, the first one is the U.S. Official delegations from the federal government. And the next one is the American People's Delegation representing the states, cities, and companies. It is really hard to judge which one attracts more attention than the other internationally in this COP, and I will come to that in details later. Next slide. I hope I will not make this too academic because it is part of the report that I just wrote days ago. The first one is the official delegation from the federal government. I think we all know that America has made up its mind to quit the Paris Agreement. So this year is the first year that the U.S. delegation joined in the negotiation on an agreement that they are determined to leave. So, and their performance has actually repeatedly reminded us of this decision. For the first point, the traditional U.S. Special Envoy of Climate Change, we all know it was Todd Stone for the first time, was not in the team this year. If I didn't remember wrong, on the August 29th, I think, the Secretary of State Rex Tillerson wrote to the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations to abolish most of the special envoy positions in the reason that those issues no longer required a special envoy, and the issues included the climate change. I think Sarah knows that, right?
Yeah, like half the positions still aren't filled in the entire like executive branch of the government.
Yeah, so now, as far as I know, all the things related to the climate change has been moved to the Bureau of Oceans and International and Scientific Affairs. And I don't think that that kind of bureau is really suitable for tackling climate change issues because no such experience that I have heard from that bureau. And the second point, this year, the US just sent 48 people to the negotiation arena, about half the number of last year, and they refused to pay for the National Pavilion. This was really obvious to me because last year when I was in COP, I went to US Pavilion a lot because there was a lot of like pressures, research sharing, and some communications and reports there. None of them exist anymore. The next one is, I hear some echo. Can anyone turn off their voice? Okay. Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
The last point is their side event on fossil fuels. Yeah, this side event, when I saw it first in the agenda, it was about the clean technology, but I don't know why they changed that into the fossil fuels, and it was really uh, it was real contradictory to all of the topics in the negotiation arena. During this side event, when they talked about the future of clean fossil fuels, almost 2/3 of the audience stood up, sang, and protested. And when they finished the 7-minute song, they left the room empty. It was really embarrassing at that time, and it was also obvious to us because we all know the idea that clean fossil fuels has largely been improved economic sectors. Yeah, next slide. Hi, Sarah. Next slide, please.
Not this one? The negotiation performance?
Hi, Sarah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I mean, the next slide. Yeah. Yeah. And the next one for their performance in the negotiation. It's fair to say that the delegation this year remained quite quiet for the first time in the negotiation table for most of the time, partly because they have nothing to add in the agreement that they have already declared to quit. For this year, I did a research on that and find 25 of the 48 negotiators have been in COP before, so there was still continuity in their stance. But on the other hand, because now the negotiation is under a president with a tough position on climate change, so this year's delegation is stricter with issues like transparency, finance, and pre-2020 actions. And they have rejected with Americans' best interests. The White House Energy Policy Advisor George David Banks this year was really popular in a lot of public medias because he told that the first priority of the U.S. delegation in COP23 was to combat the differentiation, which is part of the principle of common but differentiated responsibility, and which means that the different treating between developed and developed countries considering their historicity. And one astonishing word that he said was that I didn't know what the 2-degree target is. So a lot of media reported that story. Next slide, please. Yeah. Of course, the change in Americans' position and their performance in COP lead to a lot of public reactions. On the first days of COP23, Syria joined the Paris Agreement, making the US the only country in the world that rejected the world water treatment. And a civil society group known as the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance called for the US delegation to be barred from attending the negotiation because its decision to Macron said during his speech that France will replace US share of UN scientific funding with IPC. So most of them go into the other direction of the federal government. The last one, the last slide.
There we go.
Yeah. So the last slide is talking about the another delegation which represents the states, cities, and companies. It was really interesting that although there was no official US pavilion in COP23, just outside the negotiating arena, there was a series of large domes called the US Climate, which was supported mainly by Bloomberg and other climate action leaders. They held a slogan out in alliance of the people around the world, and they laid out the report of Americans' pledge, and they constituted the Americans People's Delegation in COP23, which they held a side event on Saturday, the first week. I just read part of the report, and it says that if the people constitutes this group were a country, that will be the third largest country in the world. Yeah, and by the way, California is gonna hold the Global Climate Action Summit next September, also demonstrates Americans' leadership in the climate change. So this people's high-profile appearance was a surprise in this COP under the normally absence of the official delegation. And it also sends some kind of hope because we know that US is a highly market-based society, so there are some hope that they can achieve their commitments without the states, cities, and companies' efforts. Yeah, so that's what I want to share today. I hope I haven't got you asleep because it's kind of academic. So welcome your questions and comments. Yeah.
Cherry, I should add that next week in my city of Chicago, we're hosting the Global Cities for Climate Change Summit or something like that. That's not what it's actually called, but it's something like that. It's inviting a bunch of world leaders, or I'm sorry, city leaders and mayors and things like that to come and talk about how as a city they're addressing climate change and addressing climate change in urban settings. So I'm mad that I can't get in to it because I'm not a mayor, but I'm really wanting to go.
Yeah, that's great. I know that there will be a summit in France just around next week, and another in America. So let's also hope that people are attaching more importance to climate change around the world.
Mm-hmm. And I'll probably talk more about that in my section. Does anyone have questions for Cherry?
你们的语速太快，我得重听一遍，我才能听懂你们都说的是啥。我这是外国小姐姐的。
Oh, there's something in the chat. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was wondering what that was too.
Yeah.
Make
You can start first, and if they have questions, they can just put in the chatting room.
Okay. Oh, wait. Actually, Yara's on. Yara, did you want to talk a little bit about, sorry to put you on the spot. Did you want to talk about your experiences at COP first?
Okay, hello. Sorry for late. About Pakistan, an experience about climate change situation, and I don't have any slide.
That's fine.
Okay.
I'm just gonna put this one up.
Yes, I heard it from Pakistan Pavilion, and they tell me they have a big mountain called Himalaya. You know, there's a mountain between China and Pakistan, and there was some glacier on the mountain because global warming. So the glacier melting, and they are suffering from flood, and many glacier will move to the village very sharply, and the village will be merged by the glacier. So they are facing this problem, and Pakistan is a developing country, and they are suffering from many also academic, economy problem and climate problem. So I think they are facing a contract between the climate and the economy, and also they don't know how to dealing with the glacier problem, and so there is a problem. And also China helping them to build hydro dam on the river in Pakistan, and also China helped them develop some economy, like factories in the Pakistan, and they are very satisfied with what China have done to them because they think they have money, and China use very low carbon emission technology in this industrial. So they are very happy. But for me, I think it's not so the problem of the climate change, because we are still make carbon emission, and they still don't know how to deal with the glacier melting problem. So that's what happened in developing country. And the others is I heard from Nordic Pavilion, and they are tell people that they are doing some like solar energy industrial and some very clean energy. I think that's what developed country doing. So it's really a contract with the developing country, because the developed country, they don't need much economy development. So they can think about clean energy and such things. But for example, Pakistan, they are facing climate problem, but at the same time, they're doing some economy development. They make many carbon emission. So that's the really impressive things I want to share in this webinar. Thank you.
Thanks. Another note to BJ's question. All the countries that are parties of the UNFCCC, which is this logo right here. I don't know if you guys can see my group chat. I hope not. Yeah, this logo here. They are all technically on even footing during the negotiation process. So everyone is given kind of an equal voice. But of course, as always happens, certain countries have more power because of different economic reasons, or just they historically have had more influence in all sorts of negotiations. And so those countries end up having a little more influence on what the other countries say they're going to do. And so if it's just one country that believes something, fine. But if they start convincing all these other countries to join them or like disagree with them, then that's going to influence who has a greater say or influence the negotiation process. So, for example, in the past, countries like the US have had more of a leadership position, and they've been able to convince other countries. This year, not so much, which was really good because they should not be considered a leader for climate change ever, like ever, regardless of who is president. We should not be leaders in climate change because we just contribute to it. That should be clear. But in this particular COP, the US did not garner a lot of support from other countries for what they were doing for very obvious reasons. And so with least developed countries, in some of the negotiations I sat in, I saw like Ecuador was kind of leading the conversation about indigenous rights and capacity building, which I thought was great. And then I'm trying to think what other countries were speaking up a lot in that negotiation. Like Canada was, because they have some indigenous groups in the far north reaches. But yeah, like Ecuador was doing a really great job of pushing for strong regulations to support indigenous groups and their right to intellectual property. Because if corporations are able to claim intellectual property rights, then so should the indigenous groups, right? And so that was how the conversation was going. To answer Shreya's question, no, we can't really lock up the US or kick them out of the conversation because they are a party to this United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So, as you heard from Cherry, there was a group, the Pan-African, what was it called? The Pan-African Summit, that was trying to kick them out of the negotiations. And I don't know if that would necessarily be a solution, because hopefully under a new president, they'll be able to contribute more positively to the convention and to the discussions.
I want to add some. Now, some of them are putting forward a solution that to move the negotiations on the Paris Route Book to the process under APA, not under UFCCC, which means that although America is part of the UFCCC, but it will not be a part of APA and will not join in the negotiation.
Oh,
that's somebody are putting forward and pushing for that, but I think it might not be possible in the near term. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. She said that so what they were discussing at this COP and the last COP in Marrakesh, what they've been discussing since Paris essentially is how to implement the Paris Agreement. And so we have like 4 years to, or is it 4 years, right? To discuss how we'll actually enact the Paris Agreement before it starts going into action. And in 2020, there's kind of going to be when they start implementing it. And then in 2023 is going to be the first global stocktake, it's called, which is when all the countries will submit reports of their emissions, and we're going to try and figure out how much carbon emissions have been reduced of what would have been emitted. People will be talking about what what adaptation strategies they've taken. So if they've had to build higher levees to prevent flooding, or if they've done trainings for low carbon agriculture, or for reducing the like planting drought resistant crops. That'll be something that will be talked about in this global stocktake. So in 2023 is when that will be enacted. So in these years, we're trying to figure out how we're going to implement the Paris Agreement, how we're going to measure the stocktake so that we're not double counting any emissions, and that we're making sure that everything is included in that stocktake. Cherry, go for it.
After you, I think you can provide some of the information during your presentation.
Okay, sure. So what I was going to talk about a little bit was I only did these slides last night at the last minute, so they're not completely done, but because, yeah, Cherry showed up everyone and had slides ready, and I didn't, so I thought I'd put together a couple, if I can, there we go. So this first slide is just some pictures from the Conference of Youth, or COI, and right here is can you guys see my clicker when I circle things?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
cool. So right here is the president of the COP proceedings. So this man is Frank Bainimarama. Yeah, Bainimarama. And he is the Prime Minister of Fiji. So he was in charge of leading the proceedings, of facilitating discussions and things like that. Next to him is Patricia Espinosa. She's the executive secretary of the UNFCCC. And both of them spoke at the closing ceremony of COI. So this Conference of Youth was a 3-day summit preceding COP, where youth came together and discussed our policy initiatives. And you can see everyone's raising the climate sign. It was super exciting. And some of the things we did here, we were working on some policy. There were different workshops. This is one of the Care About Climate team members, Emily Rushton, presenting on some communication strategies for how to talk about climate change with difficult audiences. And in this picture, we are sitting with another UNFCCC member. This is, she's right here, Adriana Valenzuela. She is the focal point to the UNFCCC for education and youth. And she's discussing with, here we've got Kelvin, one of Amalen's colleagues from Malaysia, and his his partner for the farm initiative that he's working on. And a couple other Global South scholars are in this picture. And in this setting, we were talking about achieving climate empowerment, or ACE, which is one of the points of the Paris Agreement. It's in Article 12, I believe. And it talks about how we can encourage people, how we can empower people around the world through capacity building to know more about climate change and to be able to act on it in their own communities. So that's one of the things that we do with the online youth exchange is we're working on capacity building so that all of us can go out and be leaders in our own communities. Here's a better picture of the president. And this is one of the things that was most interesting to me. This was the open dialogue. So at COP22 in Marrakesh, there was a decision to include stakeholders in the decision-making process. And this contributed to that ACE, the Achieving Climate Empowerment, because the parties realized that it shouldn't just be government that's deciding what we're doing to address climate change. It should be the stakeholders. And so currently there are 9 stakeholder institutions or constituency bodies that are present during the UNFCCC processes. And so those range from business, research, local government and city government, indigenous groups. Youngo right here is youth NGOs. That's the one that all of us were part of this year, that are speaking today, that is. There's Women and Gender. There's a couple others that I'm not thinking of right now. But that's in essence a lot of the groups that contribute to these proceedings. And so we're during the negotiations, we're allowed to give interventions. And usually those are limited to 1 or 2 minute statements where we have to say basically everything that we want to happen during that procedure, during that discussion for the entire COP. So in the past, what we've been given is they give us a 1 or 2 minute statement during the opening and the closing ceremony, and that's it. That's the only way we get to directly intervene in the processes, which is why the actions that Amalen spoke to are so important, because those are a way that we can show what we care about without, having to give a 2-minute intervention or fit it into a 2-minute intervention, because there's so much that we want to say as youth or just as our own delegation that we want to have heard in the proceedings. This year, for the first time ever, they opened what's called an open dialogue. And during this open dialogue, all the stakeholder groups like Youngo were encouraged to speak openly. And there was not a time limit on how long we had to present. And there were 3 general questions to this process. It's let me find my paper. They're not hard questions, but I'm blanking on them right now. Here we are. It's where are we? Where do we want to go? And how will we get there? And so the first part is talking about the reports and summaries of different countries' nationally determined contributions. So where are we? What does it look like right now when we look at climate change worldwide? Here are the problems we're facing, is what a lot of people were talking about. Indigenous groups were talking about, their land being taken away or habitat destruction, things like that. Where do we want to go? This is where we again pushed for that maximum of 1.5 degrees of average temperature rise on a global scale. If we get to 2 degrees, then a lot of island nations will be underwater, and it is kind of that's that breaking point that we can't pass. That's that threshold. And then how do we get there? We're asking for stronger nationally determined contributions, stronger commitments to climate finance is an important thing, especially for less developed countries and developing countries. We need finance to be promised and actually provided by the developed countries to be able to reach our goals. A lot of countries have put contingencies in their NDCs that they'll only be able to do up to a certain point unless they get climate finance. And so finance was a really important point that was only briefly discussed during the procedure. But during this open dialogue, what was important was that all the countries were able to have a dialogue instead of just an intervention with the stakeholders. And again, this was a really big step for stakeholders to be included in the actual development of processes. So the Young Go intervention was very specific in asking for action on ACE, that Achieving Climate Empowerment. And so during the intervention, we Ugratna, our representative who spoke here, she's awesome. She's from India. She's 21 and has been involved since she was like 12 in these proceedings, if I'm not mistaken. Or I'm sorry, not in these proceedings necessarily, but in climate change action. And so we were talking about asking for more support for youth to have education on climate change. So developing curriculums in schools on climate change would be an important step. Encouraging stakeholder involvement more and having dialogues on a local or national level where our national delegations are coming to groups like Care About Climate or Her Plant for the Planet or Nepalese Youth Climate Action Network, Nepalese Youth Climate Movement, all these different groups that are working on the ground for climate action. We need to be included in the discussion more and be empowered to be included, as well as to include our community members. And so that's what that intervention was about. So this dialogue will be continued throughout all of 2018 and will close at COP24 in December or November, December of next year, which will be taking place in Poland. And it just is providing some feedback for the president to see how we can all come together, how these stakeholders can be more involved. And it'll be a way to push forward ambition. One of the things that really needs to be done is for NDCs to be ratcheted up, it's called, which is where they say, so when the Paris Agreement was ratified, countries finalized their NDCs and said, this is what we are going to be doing for climate action in our country. And now looking at estimates from the UN Environmental Program, the UNEP, we've seen that that's not going to be enough. That's only going to get us 1/3 of the way to, it's only going to get us 1/3 of the way to the 2-degree difference that we're asking for, and we need 1.5 to be really successful. So we're only 1/3 of the way to closing that emissions gap, they call it, and we need to fill the other 2/3 with higher NDCs, with greater action for climate change mitigation. And so to do that, we're asking for these countries to step up and increase their NDCs because they're only allowed to increase them or stay the same. They can't reduce them. Sorry if I'm being a little scatterbrained right now. But COP had me a little scatterbrained, I felt like. And so, so this 3-hour session of the open dialogue, the 3 questions were, how do we raise ambition on NDCs? How do we get access for NGOs to engage in the sessions? And I can't find the 3rd question written down on here. But essentially, but a lot what we were asking was for these NDCs to be ratcheted up to include ways for the stakeholders to get more involved. And so we wanted there to be like a youth envoy from each country to be in charge, or a youth focal point for ACE we were asking for, so that each country could have someone who's involved in the school system or just graduated or things like that. Someone who's integrated with the people who are attending school or university so that they can go and give talks at different universities so that they can help develop the curriculum on climate change so that our youth can be empowered to act in their local communities. I'm going to stop there and just flip through the next slides and see if there's anything of value there. Oh, the last thing I want to show is this bowl is of kava, which is a Pacific drink that is made from a tuber or root vegetable that is ground up with water. In some cultures, it's chewed and spit out and mixed with water, so mixed with saliva instead. And they shared this drink at the close of this open dialogue session that we attended as a way of showing that we're all at an equal ground. It's a participatory dialogue, it's a transparent dialogue, and inclusive. And so we were all included. And that goes with a Fijian word called Tanaloa, which was really the essence of what the Fijian president wanted to share with us at this COP. He wanted this COP to be participative, inclusive, and transparent, with all stakeholders being involved in the discussion. And so this was just a symbolic way that he closed the session to show that we are all included. Oh, here's a little fun thing that we did at COP. We had flat mow. So last year's online youth exchange included a guy named Mohammed Faisal from Egypt, and he is currently studying in China, so he was not able to attend COP, but he wanted to be included and kind of present at the COP, so he wanted us to take some pictures with him. And so I made this, actually Cherry helped me make a flat mow, and we took some pictures with him using the climate sign. And so it was a way that we encouraged people to use the climate sign during COP. This is a collage of photos that I didn't finish processing. Here's Amalen, yay, with our friend Adriana Valenzuela to show our support for ACE during, this was at COI that we took this picture, but she was just an awesome resource to have during the whole of COP. And this is a traditional Fiji canoe, that shows that we are all on the same boat when it comes to climate change. We are all going to be affected together because we are all, on the same planet. And so we all need to work together and steer in the same direction towards greater climate action. Another kind of metaphor that was given, or simile that was given, was that in Fiji, the elders sit in the back of the canoe and they steer, but it's the youth that row the boat. And so it's up to us to be rowing and giving that power to the action, to the climate change action by sharing what we hear, empowering others, our classmates in our own communities, and just working together to push for greater commitment. And then finally down here is just one of the cool things of COP is that you get to meet really cool, important people. And so we saw people like Al Gore and Arnold Schwarzenegger at the conference, as well as state leaders. I'm in this picture with the Chilean Minister of the Environment. And so he's like the head environmental official in Chile. And so I was really excited to meet him. And Amalen saw how excited I was because I saw him right after meeting him, and I was pretty excited. So that was like the highlight of my COP. And this is even more disorganized with the same picture, but you see me painting the Step Up banner that Amalen showed. And then, yeah, okay, so that's all the pictures I have, I think. Oops. So yeah, we're just gonna go back here. And are there any questions? I know we're over time. But are there any questions, or does Cherry want to share what she was going to address earlier? Ah, really? I want to see that selfie, Cherry. That sounds really cool.
Yeah. But I was not as beautiful in that selfie, but I made Algo really cool in that picture.
That's the important part, that you got the celebrity.
Go back to the question. Let me see. The first one, how the least developing countries go into the negotiation process. I found some just when Sarah was talking, and actually the least developing countries are different from each other in the process, but there are some main outcomes. The first one is, like Sarah has mentioned, the establishment of the local communities and indigenous people platform, on which platform parties management to set up open dialogue on advancing that in UFCCC intercessions in May, and it was also the first time to get that into the agenda of the official negotiation. The second one is the agriculture, which parties agreed to hold workshops and expert seminars in discussing the sensitivity of agriculture to climate change and try to find out solutions to the food security under the official subsidiary institutions, which are the SBI and SBSTA. The third one, they made some progresses in the pre-2020 actions, because Paris Agreement will just come into effect in 2020, and before 2020, only developed countries should take actions under the Kyoto Protocol, and they should provide some support to the developing countries. Until now, that topic was not mentioned a lot in the process, but this time they put that in the agenda at the beginning of the first week, and finally made it into the final outcome of the Beijing Momentum for Implementation, which is the main outcome of the document. Also, there are some others just concerning some of the countries, like the Gender Action Plan, which is the first plan to mention gender in the UFCCC process. And also, I cannot remember what I'm gonna to say. Okay, the next question, let me see. Where is it? Okay, if there are not any supreme body, I think you are asking for the void of leadership, right? I didn't quite get this question. Yeah, if you are asking for the leadership, whether there is still a leadership in replacing the USA this year, I might say no, because China, as a developing country, is doing its best to reduce the emission, but not holding the position of the leader. While the traditional leader, like the EU and the umbrella group, when the US pull out, they are not as active as years ago, and even EU rejects some of the documents, like the finance and the loss and damage, because they think that the results that are shown in the document are not fully scientific based, which I'm not really believing. And also for the finance, no countries, just the France made a pledge that it will pay some of the money in replace of US to the IPCC, which is a scientific body, but no other developed countries made higher ambitions in finance. Other questions? Oh, let me see.
There were two more. Do you want to address Maha's question? Is it possible for us to attend COP? And then
Where?
Adrian.
Is this possible? Of course, it's possible. Like, you can join some NGOs like CAC and CYCAN for Chinese youth. But also you can join the COP through some institutions like I joined in the research group of my university this year. Also as volunteers, I think that's possible. But Amalen may have more experience because I see his name on the list of the UFCCC document. I don't know what that is. You can ask Amalen for more information. Was there any discussion on climate effect in biodiversity? I don't think that were included in the negotiation, but there were a lot of side events there and almost tens of several dozens of side events talk about that. But I didn't attend any of them, so if you are interested, you can search on the internet for some information. If we go as volunteers, I'm not sure about what debates and conversations volunteers can take, but I think they can take most of them, apart from some of the close negotiations. Those negotiations are not open to all of the observers. But for the side events, I see a lot of volunteers this year in the rooms. So a lot of activities that can be attended by volunteers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to quickly explain the badge process. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
So to attend the COP, you have to have a badge that's given to you by the UNFCCC. They have to, know everyone who's in the conference, especially because there are some state leaders, like Emmanuel Macron was there, Angela Merkel was there, and there were leaders from 20 or 30 heads of state were at the conference. And so they really want to make sure that, there aren't going to be people going in that they don't know who they are, or there's a lot of security that goes into it. As well, there's limits to how many people can fit in the physical space. And so that was an issue this year, especially because there were just a lot fewer badges given out, it's felt like. And so Care About Climate, for example, received, what was it? We got 4 badges to go into the area that was the negotiation zone, the Bula zone. And then we had 6 badges to go into the bond zone. And the bond zone was where all the side events were happening. That's where we held meetings as Youngo. That's where there was the booth that had the Care About Climate banner behind us, where I did the call on the 10th of the month, and things like that. The Bula zone is where most of the officials stay, because that's where they're actually doing their negotiations, and there's also press conference rooms in that area. And so there were 2 kinds of badges that you could get this year, one that lets you into the Bula zone and one that lets you into the bond zone. And if you have a Bula zone badge, you can go into both zones. And then they badge different people. So you can get a badge as a party, meaning your national government is supporting your presence there. And that might mean just they give you a badge and you pay your own way, or they might have some financing available for you. Oh, Nisreen just joined on. Hey. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. She was able to get a party badge and was the ACE focal point for her for her country. Is that correct? Hey. See, and Nisreen was on a party badge. And then there are observer groups, which was what Care About Climate was. So Amalen and I were on observer badges. And then there's also media presence. So they can get into certain things and certain things they're not allowed to, just to take pictures. And then there's also a secretariat, which is the UNFCCC staff as well as volunteers who are helping run the conference. And so the volunteers were giving directions to people, kind of pointing them which way to go for certain events. They were helping, like there was catering that they were helping with, like setting up the food, things like that. And so you can go as a volunteer, and then they kind of give you a badge. This year, there was such an overwhelming number of volunteers that wanted to attend that, like, they were just too many. They couldn't accept all of them. And as a volunteer, you're able to attend the side events. You probably can't get into too many of the negotiations, though. I didn't see any volunteers in negotiations. But as an observer, you are able, in this case, with a Bula Zone badge, you are able to go into the negotiation sessions. Any other questions, or does Nisreen want to give a couple comments? I know we're like half an hour over now, but those of you who have to go, obviously, go ahead and go to sleep because I know it's late for some of you. But if you can stay on for a little longer and want to hear from Nisreen, or if she wants to say anything, you're welcome to. Nisreen? Hello? Wait, is she still on? Oh, maybe she fell off. Okay. All right, Nisreen's not here, so that would explain why she's not talking. But were there any last questions before we finish up? If not, then the last thing I want to add before we close is that I really, really, really want to see your presentations from you and from your groups. And so starting next month, meaning it like tomorrow is the start of next month, and December 10th is going to be our next webinar, but we have no one signed up yet. And so I need you guys to talk to your partners like today. Okay, for those of you in China, you guys can sleep and then tell them tomorrow. But like in Nepal, I expect you guys to do it today, tonight before you go to bed, if possible. And please sign up to present with your group. It's really not as daunting of a task as you may think. It's really low key. Just be relaxed and share the knowledge that you have. You can use research from papers you've written in the past. Last year I did a presentation where I just opened up a big paper that I did for a class on agriculture subsidies and just talked about that because that was something that I'd studied, I really enjoyed and learning about, and I had the information right there. And so you don't have to we want you to put effort into these, of course, but the most important is that it's something that's relatable to everyone, that it's something that we can all learn from, and most importantly, if it's a solution or a strategy, that's something that's replicable, that people can go out in their own communities and try out and put into action, so that we can be creating these climate solutions as a group and just brainstorm together and talk about what works best and then start doing them in our own communities. So one example that I want to point out, a really good one that we had last year, was about bike sharing. And so they talked about bike sharing in San Francisco versus in Beijing. And they talked about why the Beijing one was a lot more effective system. Why? Because San Francisco is a really hilly city, whereas Beijing is relatively flat. And so when you've got lots of big hills, people don't really want to bike up and down them, especially Americans. We're very lazy and don't like physical exercise. And so people didn't want to be biking up and down the hills. So it didn't work as well as their public transportation network. Their bus system and their trolleys are great because they take you up and down the hills for you. And so the bike companies were having to bring the bikes back up to the top of the hills at the end of the day because no one was biking back uphill home from work. Whereas in Beijing, it works really well. The distribution of bikes, there's so many bikes, as Cherry can attest to, I'm sure. And so Adrian just asked me if there are any specific topic types that you are limited to discussing. One, it should be related to environmental work or climate change, obviously. And then there are 3 categories of discussions, of topics. So the first topic category is environmental issues. So there you can talk about something like deforestation or air pollution or waste management, and talk about the broader issue. For that, I'd recommend you look at some official documents from a UN report or from scientific studies and have some research to back you up. And then you can also talk about how those issues are addressed in your countries as well. But make sure you have some kind of oomph to it, some research background to it. You could also, just for that issue, you could take an official document from a UN agency or a state agency and just take that apart and talk about how that, and kind of give it in a tangible segment. So someone took a UN Food and Agriculture Organization's 30-page report on deforestation and broke it down into tangible bits for us last year. And that was really helpful to learn what was really important about deforestation. The second topic topic category is solutions. So that's where you're talking about things that are being done in your own communities, solutions that you've seen enacted through media pieces or through your own experiences, and what you guys are doing on the ground as well is obviously solutions. And that's where you'll talk about how you can address these issues. And so what are the solutions? How do you implement them? And how can I take the solution that you used and use it in my own community? That last part is so important. And then finally, you can talk about strategies for environmentalists. So on Cherry and Amalen's presentation last year, because they were partners last year, which is really fun, they talked about some strategies for how to influence politicians, how to influence local government, and how to influence different stakeholders to be more involved in or to start addressing climate change. And so how do you get a meeting with your politician or policymakers? How do you as a youth talk to media so that they listen? Things like that. Those are the sorts of strategies that you might want to talk about. You can also talk about working with volunteers and volunteer recruitment, how to talk in your own communities or on your campuses, things like that, how to start a green club. Any of these are awesome things that you could talk about as a strategy. Did that answer most of the questions? Oh, Nisreen? Go ahead. Oh, let me unmute you. Yeah, there you go. Oops, sorry, I just made you. Did you?
Okay. Hi, sir. Do you
Hey.
hear me well?
Yep.
How are you? Yeah, I just want to welcome everyone here, and I wish I could join you earlier, but because I had to do other things and the network problems, so I couldn't join until a few minutes ago. So I just want to talk about my participation at COP23 as a brief, because I might to leave a don't for
Nisreen, you're breaking up a bit. Nisreen, it's really hard to hear you.
Delegate at this COP. I was also part delegate at. Can you hear me now?
You're kind of going in and out. So I can hear you now, but for a little bit I couldn't, and
yeah, but now it's
okay.
Now it's perfect.
Cool.
Yeah, so I'm going to speak about my participation at COP23. I was a party delegate. I was also party delegate in Morocco. So, but I'm not working at the government. I'm just an NGO. But because our government is weak in certain areas, so they allow NGOs make a stronger. Like a delegation going somewhere, so Ministry of Environment, they held a meeting for the COP to see, and then they give them
Nisreen, I can't hear you.
can you hear me now?
Now I can, but I think you just keep going in and out. So I hear a sentence and then I can't hear.
Hello. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
So at the negotiations, I was signed from my delegation, Sudan delegation, to follow the ACE negotiations, which is Article 6 at the Convention and Article 12 at Paris Agreement. and it's talking about training, public awareness, public participation, and education. I was also that was my main assignment, but I was also following gender negotiations and capacity building negotiations. So as a party, I have to report back to the Ministry of Environment, focal point for climate change in Sudan. But also I had to, because most of governments, yeah, they do give you the party badge, but they don't give you the fund. So you have to fundraise to yourself before the COP. So luckily I was funded by UNEP, United Nations Environment. So I had also to report to UNEP Sudan, and every area and every institute, they ask for different reports. So the Ministry of Environment, they just want the ACE report. So I had to write the negotiation track in the outcome. Frequency of having submissions, because submissions of the ACE are open, and I repeat, it's open for NGOs, observers, and also parties until the 26th of January. So I was pressing on the importance of having submissions, because as I say always, our people, they deserve to know what's going to happen to them, and they deserve to know it in a proper way. So I encourage every one of you to go back to your NGOs or your and support them to have submissions for this particular area. Also, they ask for day-by-day report, which is very hard to do. In one day, I had to follow like 7 meetings, 3 for gender, sorry, 2 for gender, and 3 for capacity building, and 2 for 2 for no 1 for ACE, 3 for capacity building, and 3 for. There were literally 7 meetings in one day. As usual, also, yeah. Yeah, the overall look that for the ones who didn't attend any COPs before, usually we have a schedule, daily schedule, and we have parallel events, so we can have like 5 or 6 meetings at the same time, starting at 9, ending at 10. So you have to, if you try to follow too many things, like I did just last year in Marrakesh, I was following 4 or 5 things at the same time, so I end up with nothing because I was very distracted. And actually I had 3 events at the same time, so I used to attend 15 minutes from the first event, 15 minutes from the second event, and 15 minutes from the third event, and the last 15 minutes, because it's four quarters, I spent moving between the rooms. So I can follow it from A to Z. And actually, now I'm thinking 3 topics are too much. Done a lot.
Nisreen, I can't hear you.
What about now? Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're back.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So I have a certain angle, and if I move from that angle, then I don't get connection.
Oh.
So I'll have an exercise right now.
Okay.
Okay. So because it's very useful to visit the one zone, which is the homes and other side events, not negotiations are going. So I couldn't do it this COP, as I never did. I never visited the green zone last year in Marrakesh, not even one time. But this year, I had to come to Bone Zone, and at the Future and Young Generations Day, and also Education Day. So I think next year, if I could go to the COP in Poland, so I'm just going to follow two. Every year I'm going to go one topic, so I can have more time to be involved in other activities, more than negotiations. Okay. Other thing I want to talk about is groups, because every countries doesn't negotiate by themselves. They negotiate among groups. We have many groups. Sudan actually is part of four groups, which is the African group, LDC's group. LDC's is shortcut for least developed countries, and also Sudan is part of the G7 plus China, and also Sudan is part of the African group. Sorry, I said African, I mean Arab group. So we are part of four groups, but we don't agree with all of the groups. So mainly we agree with the African group, and we have some disagreement with the Arab group because the chair of the Arab group was Saudi Arabia for the last year, or I mean this year, in the COP, and they had gender issues, and so sometimes you agree with the group, and sometimes your country disagree in certain problems. But you have to figure out how, because it's very useful to negotiate as a group. One of the most powerful groups is the African group and the G77 plus China. They are very strong, and I have to doubt their strongest this year, because for me, this COP was a failure. We didn't get anything out of them. It was very weak decisions and no commitments yet. Finance is a huge problem, and the problem is finance is cross-cutting. So if we are talking about capacity building, we need finance. If we're talking about gender action plan, we need finance. If we are talking about finance, then we need finance also. And if we talked about adaptation, mitigation, everything needs finance. So it's a hell of a problem. And if any one of you saw the last submission from US, they submitted telling us literally that we spent our time with you just having fun, because everything is coming out of this COP. We are not committed to it because we already declared that we are withdrawing from Paris Agreement. So everything is.
Nisreen cut you off. Nisreen? Oh, you almost came back.
Yeah.
There we go.
What is the last thing you hear?
You said, so the U.S. said that they're not going to, uphold any of the decisions that were made at this COP because they're leaving the agreement, and
yeah, that was very that was very disappointed for us and very depressing, because they actually stopped a lot of the progress. They stopped, literally they stopped everything. Everything was going in a way, they stop it, and they move the direction to other way. So if you are not committed to any decision coming out of the COP, and you are withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, so why are you coming to negotiate with us? And I just wish if they could just withdraw or less, because all what are they doing now?
Nisreen, I can't fix your angle.
Okay, now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I came back to my angle. So I said I always wish if they can just withdraw in 1 year or less, because all they are doing inside is far worse from doing it outside because they can stop our party and they are apart. So for us, the damage is bigger with them inside than them outside. So I'm going to be around for like 10 minutes if anyone has question, if you want to know anything in particular. And thank you.
All right. Thanks, Nisreen. And so you, everyone who's here, you are welcome to follow up with any of us via email, Facebook, WhatsApp, WeChat, any of the communication tools. We probably use them, or at least one of us uses one of them. And so please reach out with any more questions you have. You can also check out the Care About Climate blog for more information. We posted a couple things there. There's actually a feature article that I wrote on Amalen talking about everything that he did during COP. And I mean, obviously, he spoke about a lot of what he did, but there's more of it in the article. There's a lot of different things that are on our blog. You can also just Google COP23 and read about the outcomes, read about things that are especially of interest to you. Nisreen, Yaura, and Cherry, if you have any publications that you want to share, feel free to post them in any of the groups, or I can share them via email if you send them to me. All right? Awesome. Thank you. And then thank you so much for being on the call today. I actually have to get going because I have to get ready for work soon. But if anyone wants to talk to Nisreen, I can put you in contact with her via WhatsApp she uses, right? I have you on WhatsApp and Facebook. So if you want to talk to her through either way, I can connect you there. So thank you all for coming, and please, please, please sign up to present next week, okay? Or I guess not next week, in 10 days. So there's one December 10th, 20th, and 30th, all right? I know there are holidays coming up for a lot of different countries. There's elections in Nepal, but please, we would love to have your participation on these next couple calls. We need people to sign up. So if you can't do December, sign up for January. But we really need people for December. So, all right, we'll see you soon. Hopefully we'll have a call on the 10th. Bye, guys.